if you read the Constitution at face value, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It captures everything that persons with disabilities have always been raising about the law. But now when you look at the law itself, our laws reflect our stereotypes, our prejudices, and beliefs on disability.
Hello viewers, in the previous interview we've been hosting a parent with 2 children on the autism spectrum disorder, and she mentioned something that was really interesting. She said that most people with intellectual disabilities, when they reach adulthood, they most often end up in forensic jails, and it left us wondering why. Yeah, and we have with us someone who's a legal practitioner, and we are sure that she's going to answer some of the questions that arose from that interview. So without further ado, I'll ask her to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Felicia Mburu. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I also so happen to be a mother to a child with special needs. So, yeah, I can see where you're going with this conversation. And there will be a lot of questions that I know I'll have to answer. So let's proceed from
there. So Jane mentioned, I'll just go through straight to the point. She mentioned that these individuals, when they go to adulthood, they end up in forensic jails. Like, I'm so curious to know why. Yeah, like before I ask any other question, I just know why.
Well, to understand the why, you need to understand the system in Kenya. Unfortunately, our system has been set up such that disability is not seen. Except for our constitution, how our laws have been set up are purely discriminatory on the basis of disability. And that's why the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was so crucial, especially for countries like Kenya to sign it. Because unfortunately, our laws reflect our stereotypes, our prejudices, and beliefs on disability. So, and that's how, when you look at it, when you start, when I get a case and you look at it backwards, like how did we end up here? You realize that it is purely the stereotypes and the prejudice that we have on disability. Unfortunately, we have also ingrained them in our law.
Yes. Yeah. So, in this case, does it mean that we as the society, we're the ones who create these laws?
Yeah.
So does it mean that we are the ones who define human value, or how do we, as in, how does the law portray like human value and dignity?
Yeah. So how that, in order to talk about the law, you have to talk about the Constitution of Kenya. The Constitution of Kenya is the supreme law of the land. All other laws draw authority from it. So now, how to break it down?
Yes, please.
When you talk about the Constitution, think of it like the Bible. Yeah. And then every other law around that is what the preachers preach, you get. So when you look at our Constitution, does it recognize life and dignity and equality? Yes, it does. If you look at Article 10 of our Constitution, which talks about the principles that we hold as a country, you know, it talks about equality before the law, non-discrimination of persons based on age, race, sex, disability, all of that. So our principles are intact. According to Article 10. Then you go to Article 27 of our Constitution, which also talks about equality before the law. And it's intentional that I'm starting with these different articles. Because whenever you talk disability, everyone goes to Article 54. Let's talk about persons with disabilities. No. Persons with disability are just that, persons. So the whole Constitution also applies to us. In particular, Article 27, which also talks about everyone in this republic is equal before the law. So it doesn't matter whether you're a refugee, whether you come from tribe X, whether you're male, female, child, adult, old, young, it doesn't matter. We are all equal. And then now, of course, there's the automatic Article 54, which talks about persons with disabilities. It's a very short section. I have my reservations about it because if you read it at face value, you'll see it's looking more on physical and sensory disabilities. It doesn't quite capture the aspect of mental, intellectual, cognitive disabilities. And then there are other sections, there are other articles of the Constitution as well, which also capture aspects that affect persons with disabilities.
Yeah.
But for now, we'll focus on these 3 articles. Now, if you read the Constitution at face value, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It captures everything that persons with disabilities have always been raising about the law. But now when you look at the law itself,
Yes.
our prejudices start being seen there. And why? Because the law, as you said, is made by men.
Yeah.
Male and female people, adults, who sit at Parliament, whether it's Senate, whether it's the National Assembly. And when you read these laws, you can actually see the biases and the stereotypes start coming out.
Yes.
One of my favorite laws that I like to criticize is the Mental Health Act, and even the pending bill, because you can clearly see it. All that is coming out is against the Constitution itself. Article 27 talks about all of us being equal before the law. So then why do we have a Mental Health Act and a Mental Health Bill that limit my rights as a person with disability? You know, it refuses to recognize that I am equal to others. And so those are some of the things that now we look at as lawyers and try to make it more practical. Like, how then can we draft laws that reflect our differences without discriminating us?
Yeah. So you mentioned about the Mental Health Act, why it's in existence, and all of us are equal before the law. So what facets of this act do you find accommodative of individuals who have special needs?
Yeah. So that's a very loaded question, but I'll try and narrow it down, because it really depends on interpretations of persons. As I mentioned first, there's the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that is considered law in Kenya.
Yes.
Unfortunately, because of stereotypes around disability, everyone will look at a blind person, will look at a deaf person, will look at a wheelchair user, and they'll be like, we get it. But when you look at mental, you can't see my disability.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of people don't perceive mental disability as a disability. How does that link up with the Constitution of Kenya? Remember, again, the beauty of the Constitution is that it does not see disability. We are all equal before the law.
Yes.
But now, when it comes to the laws themselves, for instance, the Mental Health Act, this was, the current law we have was done in 1989. So, of course, it does not comply to the Constitution of Kenya to start with. And secondly, it was built around stereotypes on disability and what mental health is. So that, for instance, when you look at the aspect of prisoners, prisoners, we know it's a criminal issue.
Yes.
But when you so happen to have a mental disability, it becomes a criminal issue as well, instead of a health issue. Yet the Mental Health Act has aspects that capture the idea of prisoners in it. For instance, if what we do as Article 48, we came to find out that there are so many cases in the criminal justice system of offenders with mental disabilities who should never have been in the system to start with. Now, how the Mental Health Act jumps into this. The law requires that for there to be a crime, you have to have 2 aspects. You have to have the intention to commit the crime and actually commit the crime. The mental, where you come before a court and the court notices that you might have unsound mind, that is the language of the court, unfortunately. What the court is supposed to do is that it's supposed to refer you under the Mental Health Act for an assessment. Now you start seeing the interference of health and criminal law in the same aspect.
Yeah.
And then when you look, so you're sent to do a mental assessment. When you look at the mental assessment, that questionnaire asks only one question: are you fit to stand trial? Yeah. But then the doctor just ticks. It's literally a yes or no questionnaire. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And the doctor ticks a checkbox. So at the end he says, fit to stand trial, or lacks insight, or something crazy like that, you know. But nothing that talks about whether you did have the intention or not to commit the crime. Now we come back to the court system. The doctor comes and presents his mental assessment of the offender. And unfortunately, if you're not, whether you're fit or not fit to stand trial, it's for the court to interpret that from a criminal perspective. And then now you end up with a mess, because if I'm not fit to stand trial, you're still sentenced to serve at the president's pleasure. If you're found fit to stand trial and you do go through the trial, but you're found guilty but insane, again, you're still sentenced to serve at the president's pleasure. In any other setting, if we remove the disability aspect of it, I would have been found, if, let's say I did commit a crime, but I did not have the intention to commit the crime, I would have been released. You know, I'd be found innocent and released. But because I have a mental disability, I am sentenced to serve under the president's pleasure, whether or not I committed the crime. Yeah. And to make matters worse, and that's where Article 48 comes in. Article 48 was, as our name says, was established under Article 48 of the Constitution, where we are arguing for the rights to a fair hearing for all persons with disabilities, and especially persons with mental disabilities. Because when we were analyzing the kind of crimes that we were seeing, committed by so-called offenders with mental disabilities, they're not crimes. You know, like someone unfortunately has a mental disability, maybe they have schizophrenia or something like that, and they have a relapse in the house. And there's this perception about people with schizophrenia that they are violent. Actually, they're not. It's more of the community that is violent towards them. So unfortunately for you, if you do have a relapse in a public setting, the first responder is always the police. And the police will take you. But question is, where are they taking you? There is no law, there is nothing, there's just perception. Because there's nothing wrong with being sick. There's nothing wrong, illegal about having a relapse in public. But because of people's perceptions on violence and disability, they call the police on you. The police arrest you. They take you to and charge you with creating a disturbance. Unfortunately for you, remember, you're still in a relapse, so you're looking of a bit of unsound mind. And since you're not fit to stand trial at that point, you're then sentenced to serve at the president's pleasure for having a relapse in public, you know.
So let me try to break it down.
So for me to be guilty of an offense, and let's say now I've been arrested, I've been sent for an assessment, and the doctor has ticked I am yes or no to stand trial. So yes, okay, do they assess? They assess your mental capacity as the doctor, or it's like, sorry.
I know it's very confusing, because that's exactly how it is. You know, that is exactly how it is. Because one of the aspects, like I said, it's the stereotypes and prejudices on people with disabilities that actually play out, and that is what you're demonstrating right now. One of the differences that the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has made clear is that you need to differentiate between mental capacity of a person and legal capacity of the person. Legal capacity is you have rights, and you should exercise those rights irrespective of who you are. Now, mental capacity is how I understand things. Well, as a child, I think like a child, I act as a child. As a woman, I think like a woman, I act as a woman. So mental capacity is that, and it's determined by so many things: society, education, age, etc. But now when you look at how our law has been set up, legal capacity and mental capacity have become one. And that is now where the problem becomes. Because the doctor, essentially the purpose of a mental assessment is to say whether I understand what I'm doing. Do I understand my charge sheet? Do I understand the court process? Am I able to participate in that process? Mental capacity.
So now, up to there, let's say, for instance, it's a yes or no. I'm not able to understand my charges. So if I'm not able to understand my charges, then it's a no. I'm not fit to stand trial. So am I supposed to be jailed?
Exactly. You are not supposed to be jailed, because now this is where legal capacity comes in. The right to a fair trial. Fair trial means you have to prove, as the police, as the director of public prosecutions, as whoever you are, you have to prove that I had the intention to commit the crime, and I committed the crime.
Yeah.
That is legal capacity now. I'm a rights holder, I should exercise my rights. But now, if the doctor has already said that I am not fit to stand through this process,
So I should be released.
I should be released.
Then now, for some reason, somehow, I have ended up behind bars.
Yes.
At the mercy of the president.
Yeah.
Will they be released eventually?
It depends. One of my favorite clients, we had him released. It was a big fight. It was a really huge fight because like these concepts I'm explaining are very theoretical.
Yeah.
And I remember at some point we had to sit with the judge. He literally called us to the chambers and like, explain to us what you mean.
Yeah.
You will be released at the pleasure of the president. Which means when the president remembers or feels like or whatever, this thing he does over Christmas.
Yeah, at the end of the year.
Yes,
somehow. Yeah.
releasing people. And you know the politics of that. I will not get into the politics of that.
Yeah.
It is very hard, to be honest, it is very hard for offenders with mental disabilities to be released by the president.
The reason?
Like I said, the politics of the day.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So as we speak, now, okay, fine, I'm going to use myself as an example so that I can understand, and maybe someone else can understand. So now, I've not been released.
Yeah.
Let's even assume I'll not even be released. What happens to me? Like, when you go to now you're in the system, you're behind bars. What happens to this person behind bars? Are they integrated with other offenders? Are they separated? Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Because I want to understand.
You are asking me to give you very difficult answers, and I'm afraid of lying to the audience. So let's be honest.
Yeah.
For instance, in 2018, we did a legal audit of offenders with mental disabilities in just 2 prisons. We didn't go to all of them. We just went to Kamiti and we went to Mathare Forensic Prison. By the way, most people do not know that Mathare has a prison in it.
Yeah, I was also surprised.
Yeah, there's a forensic prison in Mathare. And most offenders will either end up in Kamiti or Mathare Forensic Prison. That's why we chose these 2. But we do know there are other cases outside of these 2 major prisons. So in Kamiti, there's one offender who was telling us, remember this is 2018 when we did the audit. And one offender was asking us, tafadhali ambia Moi atukumbuke.
And it is 2018.
It's 2018.
So in their mind, Moi is still alive.
Moi is still president.
And president. Oh yeah, Moi is still president. Sorry.
You know.
Yeah.
In Mathare Forensic, there was one who was telling us, Kenyatta ndo alinituma hapa, nilikuwa na miaka 10. That's how we managed to calculate his age.
Hold on. 10 years?
Yes.
Why? What are you doing in a jail?
That's a very difficult question to answer.
Because I believe when you are 10, there is a system for someone who should be, who is 10.
Yeah.
And this is maybe juvenile.
Remember, this
but
is...
they have not done anything to...
based on our calculations, we are assuming, okay, President Kenyatta died in what, 1978. We are assuming that's the year he was sent to prison.
Yes.
He was 10 years old.
Yeah.
Back then, there were vagabond laws, because that's all we found in his file.
Yeah.
He was found as a child in need of care and protection.
Okay.
So when he turned 18 in the system, they sent him to prison.
All right. So... Okay. When you are a child with care, who needs care and protection,
yes,
where will the system send you today?
Exactly. That's now where you start seeing all the violations happening.
Yeah. Because there should be somewhere they are taking you where you will receive basic education, protection, a family setting.
Yeah.
Because you need all that. Because you are a child who needs protection.
Yeah.
So where did he go?
Now what happens is, under the Children's Act currently, if you're a child in need of care and protection, which is a lot of our children, especially autistic children and their business development, they're always being picked up as children in need of care and protection. Now the question is, so what happens? After they're declared as children in need of care and protection by the court, they're supposed to be taken to a safe place.
Where is this safe place?
Now, without prejudice to government agencies that work in this area, we did note that a lot of the children, especially with disabilities, ended up in remand homes.
Okay.
And I've put a disclaimer there, without prejudice, because this is what we found in 2018.
Then, these remand homes, where are they?
This would be now remand homes where child offenders are put.
Okay.
So a child in need of care and protection would be mixed with a child offender.
And that also means that this child who has intellectual disability is vulnerable, because if you have a child offender in a remand home, it means it is not safe to put a child with autism or Down syndrome in the same place as a child offender.
Yeah.
Right.
And remember, if your family is found, well, good for you and good luck. And my prayer is always, I pray that every child in need of care and protection finds their family. But in most cases, children with disabilities rarely are their families found. And then you turn 18 in the system. And that is where the nightmare begins. So in 2017, there was a case, sorry, I'm forgetting the name right now. But what happened is for children who would turn 18 in the system, they would also be sentenced to serve the president's pleasure. But what happened is there was a group of 4 men who challenged this in the Court of Appeal, and they won, and it was declared unconstitutional. So child offenders who turn 18 in the system are released immediately. Unfortunately, for children with disabilities, there seems to be a second type of law. So if a child, whether you came in as a child offender or a child in need of care and protection with a disability, and your family is untraceable, and you turn 18 in the system, let's be honest, you're going to jail.
Yeah. So you're going to say, I'll have to ask you questions process by process, because my mind
it's okay.
is on overdrive. So now we've dealt with this child who has gone to a remand home, waiting to be 18, and whatever. So let's talk about this adult who went now behind bars, because maybe they were found strolling, because people with intellectual they stray a lot. So now he has been found. He's already 18, and he has been taken behind bars. Are they mixed with other offenders, or do they have a block of their own? Exactly. From that point, as in, I want to have a clear picture of what really happens to this person when they go behind bars, because they are not fit to stand trial, so they should not be behind bars. But what happens when they end up behind bars?
Now, that is another tricky question. And again, it brings up the issue of our prejudices and stereotypes. First, let me give you what the law says. The law says if you have committed a crime, you should be taken to the police station. Or first, you should be arrested, alerted of what crime you have, what offense you're being arrested for, taken to the police station, given an OB number, and then at the earliest, within 24 hours at most, be presented before a court for you to take plea. In a good system, that is what should happen. In the disability system, first of all, the cops are confused. They're like, why are we arresting you, first of all? You'll find a lot of our children, when we're doing the documentation, we found that a lot of persons with intellectual, cognitive disabilities tend to be charged with petty offenses. Now, we don't know why. Honestly, I will not lie, because it doesn't make sense. A child was found loitering, but somehow is being charged with robbery. And you're like, how did we end up here? He was loitering. How is it?
Petty.
And knowing, first of all, let me backtrack a little bit. The vagabond laws in Kenya were declared unconstitutional. So everyone has a right to loiter. The only time it will become a problem is if you actually commit a crime, breaking an entry, robbery, something like that, causing disturbance, which is also being challenged as well. So you'll find a lot of our children, they're being charged with such offenses, causing a disturbance. And then the first thing we always do is we look back. What do you mean by disturbance? Or it's usually causing a disturbance, drunken, disorderly, and a lot of defilement cases. Very rarely do we get serious capital offenses like murder and things like that. But so if you look at those offenses, causing a disturbance, drunk and disorderly and the issue of defilement. We'll deal with defilement later because that's another category on its own. But these two, causing a disturbance and basically just being around, drunk and disorderly. You see, our children have communication problems. A child with autism most likely will be non-verbal and also non-responsive. You're talking to them, they're looking like that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not here.
Yeah. Actually, you can even call your own child and they'll assume you don't exist.
And they'll assume you're not there, you know. But you know how our police are. So to the society that doesn't understand this disability, you're being rude. So that's how you end up in the police station.
Yes.
And sometimes you won't even be charged, because remember, you can't even be communicated to about what offense you're being charged with and everything like that. And probably the police officer who arrested you has left and another shift has come in. So you even end up in the jail cell for months, days, weeks, until someone notices that you're there. And even then, that's when we end up with a lot of defilement charges. I will agree there's a different issue with defilement, but a lot of the cases we found were of defilement. I'd say about 40% of them was because the police didn't know why you were there or how to deal with you. So they, unfortunately, if you're a boy, it's a defilement. If you're a girl, it's still a defilement, but you as a victim, you know.
So they basically create charges.
Yes, create a charge so that they can take you to court. You end up in court, of course, you're traumatized by then, completely non-verbal. New environment, it's scary. No one is explaining to you in a language that you understand. Keyword, language that you understand. It is not English, it is not Kiswahili. It is simple language that I can understand as an autistic, non-verbal child. So,
hold that thought there. Because if for someone who is deaf or dumb, if they find themselves in a situation where they are in need of the justice, they are presented with someone who can translate what they're saying. And because even a child with autism, Down syndrome, whatever, they also express themselves. Then why don't we have the provision of someone who is an equivalent of a translator, only that in this case, there's a different type of communication, to act as a translator or an in-between?
That's a very good question. But before I answer it, just to correct you a little bit, also the deaf kids tend to really be misclassified as mentally disabled, which is so wrong. So as I speak about mental disability, I'm also covering deaf. Rarely do they get accommodations, even sign language services in court, even when they ask for it, because no one is paying attention to note that this person is actually signing. There are enough times I actually got a couple of clients out because I speak sign language, American Sign Language. So I was paying attention in court and I noticed, wait, this guy is talking in sign language. So I brought it to the judge's attention, and that's how they ended up getting an interpreter. So it's very complex that way. But back to your main question about why don't they do that, it's because of that, again, stereotypes. No one is patient enough to actually see and understand that non-verbal does not mean non-communicative. There are different ways in which our children talk. Even cerebral palsy children talk, you know. Just because I'm not using words like you're used to, it doesn't mean that I'm not communicating. But for that to happen, there has to be someone very keen in court to actually note that. Now, what the law has done about that is that it's created a provision for intermediaries under the Persons with Disabilities Act. So court can ask, if let's assume they notice that, oh wait, this person can communicate, just not with language. So if they do notice that, the court can ask for an intermediary to be appointed to help you communicate. But in most cases, we don't have professional intermediaries in court who actually understand non-verbal cognitive communication, you know. So you'll find that it's usually advisable for the most courts will appoint the parents or whoever it is that hangs out with this person on a daily basis. How does that present a challenge? You're a child in need of care of protection, you will find loitering. Where will we find this intermediary for you?
First of all, it will take time before they know where you belong. By the time they are discovering where you belong, they've already
breached
Yeah.
your rights because maybe you've been in the system for longer than you should be.
And you know, most children with intellectual disabilities, once they are threatened, and by children, by the here, I don't mean just anyone 18 and below. The whole spectrum. If you find an adult, a child, a youth, an old person with disability, they all react the same way. Once they feel intimidated, they go mute. It's either mute or aggressive.
Yes.
Yeah. And even in that aggression, they will not tell you anything. So you can imagine, this person is already so traumatized by the system, and then you're asking them, do you need an intermediary? He'll keep quiet on you. He won't say yes. He'll just be scared the whole time. Whether or not he committed the offense, it's not a ground for treating someone like a criminal.
Yeah.
And for that reason, you find a lot of them now end up just in the system because of that, because they didn't speak.
Yes.
Yeah.